Okay, so let's talk about paradigms. The first time I ever saw this word, I thought it said paradigm, so I was pleased when my professor pronounced it for us so that I could learn it's actually pronounced paradigm. A paradigm is an overall theory that guides an entire field. It's so well supported that it's sort of just taken for granted. It's just assumed to be true, and then we go forward from there. A good example of a theory that has reached paradigmatic status, has become a paradigm, is the theory of evolution. There's so much evidence that supports it that pretty much every field just takes it for granted. I know psychology just sort of takes evolution for granted, and we don't have to keep debating it, we don't have to keep discussing it, we're just going to take it as the starting point and then move forward from there. So I struggled and struggled to try and come up with an example of a paradigm in psychology, and I'm not sure that associationism actually has reached the level of a paradigm. But I'm going to assert that maybe it has, and I've got a picture of a dolphin who is jumping over a person. We can teach animals to do all sorts of really neat things because we can teach the animal to associate the reward with their behavior. Associationism tells us that organisms, I should say, can associate stimuli in the environment with likely outcomes, and that they can associate their responses with likely outcomes. I don't know if that's a paradigm or not. It might just be a theory. When I was in my master's degree, my research methods teacher, don't worry, this is not the last time you're going to take research methods. My research methods instructor had us read a book by Thomas Kuhn on paradigms. And Thomas Kuhn made the assertion that psychology doesn't have any paradigms. And the way he phrased it somehow offended me. I was thinking, well, what are you trying to say about my field? That we don't have any kind of guiding, overriding thing that all psychologists sort of just assume and take for granted and all agree on. So I racked my brain for like a semester trying to think of a good example of a paradigm, and every time I'd generate one, my professor would shoot it down and say, well, I don't know if it's really a paradigm because, and he'd give his case. I found it really offensive that Kuhn would assert that, but I gotta say I was unable to refute it. So I think, now I had never offered associationism when I was in grad school. I hadn't thought of that one. So maybe I might have come up with one. I'm not sure. I don't have my mentor to sort of bounce it off anymore. Here's the thing. When we have a well-accepted explanation for things, and everybody's sort of taking that explanation for granted, the theory has become so well supported that now it's a paradigm. It can become very traumatic for a field when new evidence suggests that we need to make a paradigm shift, that maybe the existing paradigm is no longer the best explanation and we need to move on to a new explanation. So let's say that we've got our old theory, our existing paradigm, and it's explaining all of the existing data very well. So well that everybody's just taking this theory for granted because it's doing a great job. Evolution's another good example of that. You know, pretty much every piece of evidence that comes in manages to support more fully the theory of evolution. Here's where things get interesting. Let's say that a new theory comes along that accounts for the existing data as well as some new data that had not been accounted for by the previous theory. This is kind of like, I'm not trying to say that language acquisition was at the stage of paradigm or anything, but it's kind of like what I was talking about with language acquisition. Skinner's theory explained the existing data, but was unable to deal with errors. Chomsky's theory, being the new theory, was able to explain the existing data that Skinner had been able to explain, as well as the new data, the existence of errors. When that kind of thing happens, when the new theory not only can account for the old data, but also something else that the old theory hadn't been able to account for, that's when we experience a paradigm shift. Now, all of us have been brought up, I can very confidently say all of us, because this happened probably 100 years ago now, so I'm pretty sure all of us were brought up under the new Einstein's theory of relativity accounting of how physics works. We all know who Newton is. We all know that he had some theories, and we know, you might even know, that Einstein's theories overturned Newton's. But because all of us were brought up under Einstein's theories, it's kind of surprising to think about, or hard to think about, hard to imagine a time when you had Newton's theories of physics as the old theory, and it's accounting for all the existing data, and then Einstein's theory as the new theory that is able to account for the existing data, but also now was able to account for things like the fact that the universe seemed to be expanding, and Newton had assumed that the universe was stable, that it was however it appeared. Einstein's theory, part of the reason why there was a paradigm shift towards quantum physics, which is Einstein's theory, is because his theory was able to account for not only what Newton had been able to account for, but also was able to account for new things that Newton had never even dreamed would ever be an issue. That caused a paradigm shift. Now, what's maybe surprising is to think about all the struggle that the field of physics went through while Einstein was making his case, and Newton's, people who had been brought up on Newton's theories were trying to cope with this new interpretation of how the world works. Anybody who knows anything about physics, some of you may have taken physics and switched over to psych or something. Anybody who knows anything about physics knows it's still not completely settled. It is not the case that we've had a smooth, complete, and total shift onto quantum physics. There are still people who are not 100% convinced that quantum physics is the best explanation of the universe. There's always stress and struggle and strife whenever there's going to be a paradigm shift. And it's partly because of people's egos. The scientists who believe the old theory and have done all their research in an effort to support or refute an existing theory are going to have to completely recast everything that they're doing now if the entire field gets involved in a new theory. If the paradigm shifts, that means that all the people who were involved in the old theory are, like, by definition wrong now. So it can be really a stress and struggle. A lot of times we have our identities tied up in the theories that we've been testing. I don't know if you guys watch Big Bang Theory, but a couple of seasons ago one of the themes was surrounding the fact that Sheldon was going to have to stop doing research on string theory because some definitive study had shown that string theory wasn't a good accounting of things. He went through several episodes. This, I guess, conveys itself into many, weeks of time or something. He was really struggling with, what does this mean for him that he's no longer going to be studying string theory? It's stressful, and so this paradigm shift doesn't happen easily. Now, if the new theory accounts for new data, but it doesn't account for the old data, then what we've got is dueling paradigms. We've got the old theory doing a great job of explaining what was known when that theory was generated. We've got the new theory that can account for new things, like maybe I've got a new theory that can account for why the universe is expanding, or the rate of expansion, or something like that, that wasn't part of the original theory. But I don't do a very good job, or better job, than Newtonian physics at explaining everything else. Well, we're going to have dueling paradigms. And so dueling is a good word for it. Dueling, they're going to be duking it out and trying to figure out which of these theories is the better paradigm for the field. And the two of them have to compete and figure out which one's doing a better job of explaining which data. Ultimately, hopefully, there'll be some kind of synthesis in the long run, where either the new theory figures out a way to explain the existing data and we all shift onto the new theory, or the old theory figures out a way to explain the new data plus the old data, and then the old theory will be re-embraced. But something's got to happen. You can't dwell with dueling paradigms for long. I will give you an example of what I mean by that. Okay, remember, psychology is a baby science. We've only been scientific in our approach to psychological questions for 130 years, something like that. We've got dueling paradigms, well, dueling theories, let's be honest. We've got dueling theories that are attempting to account for hypnosis. And each theory accounts for part of what's observed in hypnosis, but none of the theories account for all of it. Same thing with our theories on dreaming. None of the theories account for everything. Our theories of love, no one theory accounts for everything. And so we're at that little baby stage where we're still trying to just get that first congealing of our ideas into one paradigm. So what happens if, as a researcher, your findings contradict the paradigm? Well, let's find out the answer to that question in our next segment.